Hello everyone, I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. Let's begin. Edu, help, I can't leave the house and I'm going crazy. I had woken up to my usual alarm. It is Monday morning and I had to get ready to get back to work. I had spent the last week doing a marathon of League of Legends in my basement and didn't leave the house during that period. I dedicated myself to spend my staycation grinding to make it to platinum. Unfortunately, I was not able to make it. I needed more time. Granted, my job is a stay-at-home job as customer service, just answering calls and helping people online. That being said, my routine is pretty simple. I wake up, brush my teeth, make breakfast, take Lola for a walk, clock in for my job, and finally spend the rest of the day on League. Yeah, I know what an amazing life, but today it all changed. As I brushed my teeth, I had an odd feeling. As if something was off. I had just spent the last week playing non-stop League, so it could just be that my body is just trying to get back to the routine. When I say I was doing a marathon, I was doing a marathon. I avoided all outside distractions. Even Lisa, the girl I met 2 weeks ago, I met her at a party and we really hit it off. I have to thank Dylan before I forget again. Maybe that's what I was feeling, but I don't feel like that's it. I can't really put my finger on it. I stared at myself in the mirror. I have to admit I did look pretty rough, a bit pale. My hygiene was not in the best shape. Then I turned on the sink, and when I splashed my face with some water, I noticed the water didn't feel right. I quickly stepped back a bit freaked out. I stared at the water coming out of the sink. It looked more cloudy. The texture of the water felt off. It felt thicker. I turned it off and on. It looked like water. Maybe there was something going on with the pipes. I will have to call a plumber later. I checked the shower and the water was normal. Maybe it really was just the sink. I relaxed a bit with the idea that I can at least take a hot shower. I stood under the water just trying to relax my sense of unease. Something was bugging me. The disconnection of reality, even for just a week, can really have a toll on a person. Then mid-shower, the water cut off. Now I was just frustrated. I cleaned myself off and rushed downstairs into the basement to get a fresh set of clothes from the dryer. I angrily put on my clothes, but before I went back upstairs from the corner of my eye, I noticed my washer. The opening was gone. I walked up to it for a closer look in disbelief. It was my washer, but there was no opening. The door was completely gone, as if the washer was just a block of metal. Someone had to be messing with me. Dylan must have came in the middle of the night while I was knocked out and done this. He probably messed with my pipes too. This is all just some sick prank from him. I ran back upstairs and grabbed my phone. I had put my phone on Don't Disturb for the whole week, so I had a ton of notifications. I ignored them all to straight away text Dylan. The last conversation we had was the coordinations to the party. I saw your prank, Dylan. It's kinda lame, man. Come here and fix it. I breathed in and out. I had to calm down. This isn't really a big deal. It does save me from having to call a plumber if this was just some prank. Such a lame prank, honestly. But it is impressive since I didn't hear it last night. I must have been really knocked out. Trying to stay on routine, I headed to the kitchen to start breakfast. I placed the pot for coffee and got the eggs out of the fridge. I needed some background noise, so I headed to the living room to turn on the TV to listen to the news of the day. When I turned it on, I was met with static. I switched through channels and was met with nothing. If it wasn't static, it would just be a black screen. What the hell is going on? Was this part of Dylan's prank? I decided to just use my phone. I went on YouTube and looked up my favorite podcast, but when I did, I was just met with the spinning wheel of death. I had Wi-Fi bars. What was going on? I clicked to text Dylan. Dude, what did you do? I checked and both text messages were sent. So at least those are going through. I clicked to text Lisa next to answer her messages. Hey, it was nice meeting you at the party. Are you free this week? Hello? I'm starting to think I took my staycation a little too far. Now I feel stupid. I was ready to text her an apology and some bullshit excuse. I can just say my phone was broken. But when I tried clicking the bar to type, it wouldn't let me. I tapped harder and harder, but it wouldn't budge. I started tapping every other part of my phone. Home, back to the text app, YouTube, back to home. It worked. It just didn't let me text her. When I got back to the text app, her chat bubble grayed out. I have never seen the app do that before. Does that mean she blocked me? I mean, I wouldn't blame her for it. I'm such an idiot. But when I started to scroll down, I saw all the other bubbles grayed out too. I couldn't text them either. The only one not grayed out was Dylan. There is no way he messed with my phone too. Now I don't know how to feel. Anger, frustrated, stupid. Finally, Dylan responded, Hey man, nice to hear from you after a week. I bet the staycation was great. Not sure what you mean by prank. What's going on? Now I was actually mad. He is playing this dumb act of not knowing what was going on. I responded quickly. You messed with my plumbing, replaced my washer, and did something to my Wi-Fi. It's not really funny, Dylan. Just come here and put it back to normal. I waited for a bit and he responded quickly. I have no idea what you are talking about, dude. I'll come over to see what's going on. I was ready to respond back telling him he better, but his chat bubble got grayed out too. Now I couldn't text him. I tried calling, but nothing. Instead, the call will just drop immediately. Then it clicked in my head. I had forgotten about Lola. I started calling out for her. I immediately began to panic. She always greeted me in the morning, but she didn't today. I ran to check every room. I checked her bed that is usually kept in the corner of the living room. Nothing. She was gone. Now, before you judge me, I obviously still took care of Lola during my staycation. I literally saw her before bed. Maybe she got out during the night. I must have left a door open. I ran to the backyard patio door, and that's when my heart sank. Outside, I saw a giant blanket of fog covering the view of my backyard. It was thick and made it impossible to see anything past it. I could only make out shapes, but nothing of the details. I stood there in disbelief. I have never seen something like this. This just wasn't any kind of ordinary fog. When I reached for the patio door, it didn't budge. I checked the lock and it was unlocked for sure. But the door wouldn't budge. I pulled and pushed with all my strength and it wouldn't budge an inch. I reached for the window and it wouldn't budge either. Now the feeling of dread was starting to really sink in. I ran to every corner of my house and every opening to the outside world wouldn't budge. My breathing started to become erratic. I was feeling claustrophobic. My heart started to pound in my ears. I started to look around. There has to be an answer to what is going on. Then I noticed the eggs I took out this morning were gone. I opened the fridge to make sure I didn't put them back in by accident, but not just the eggs were missing, but many food items were missing too. I shut the fridge in frustration and turned to the coffee machine only to see the pot sitting there. I smacked myself to snap into reason. Am I going crazy? I have to think of a reasonable explanation. But I feel like that only made me crazier. If things are going missing from this morning, that could only mean the person doing this to me is in my house. That is the only logical explanation. I don't think this is Dylan. This is someone who is trying to torment me or worse. Well, whoever this is, they are stuck in here with me. The only problem is I didn't want to go look for him. If it wanted to do harm to me, looking for him and potentially walking into its trap is exactly what it would want. I can't explain the fog outside, but at this point, the lengths it's gone to keep me trapped here, I can see it being part of its plan. But then again, I realize the flaw of my thinking. I already checked every room in the house when I went looking for Lola, and no one came out to kill me. It could potentially be sitting in a closet waiting for me to open it to lunge out and kill me then. I was shaking at this point. Out of anger or fear, I couldn't tell you. I opened my phone one more time for a Hail Mary. Then I noticed the notifications that I ignored earlier. There were multiple new emails, more than usual, and multiple with the important tag on them. When I opened my inbox, multiple emails had the subject as Warning, 5 days left. Warning, 4 days left, warning. 3 days left, warning. 2 days left, warning. Final warning. I didn't recognize the sender. The email was unrecognizable. It was a business email. That's all I could put together. I couldn't open the emails no matter how hard I pressed on the screen. How is it possible to be able to see my inbox but not be able to see or respond to my emails? But again, nothing on my phone was making sense. I hadn't received any new text messages. My last email was that final warning email. Now I truly feel like something bad is happening to me. Those subject titles from those emails were only making me more anxious. Could it be a warning from my captors? Could I have prevented this if I only had checked my email once during my staycation? I tried calling 911 and every phone number on my phone and nothing worked. But instead of the call just dropping, I instead was met with a female voice. Your features have been suspended for the time being. Then the call dropped. Shouldn't it be services rather than features? I don't know, and honestly, it was least of my concerns. I couldn't call for emergency services. Then I remembered that Dylan said he was on his way. The best thing I can do now is to just wait for him to arrive. Thank God I was able to send that text message out. Dylan right now is my last hope in getting me out of this. I should wait in the living room until he arrives, but as I walked into the living room, it was empty. The furniture and even my TV were gone. Everything was gone. This wasn't a person doing this. It was an entity, an anomaly, paranormal. This was something not from this world. The world as I know it was coming to an end. My world. Things around my house are disappearing right before my very eyes. In desperation, I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and threw it against the patio door. Didn't budge. It is as if my house had become whole. The fog was still outside, same as earlier. Then a shadow passed through the house. I ran to the front door. The shadow of someone passing outside peered into the living room, but when I looked outside, I couldn't make out any details. I only saw the silhouette of someone, but I couldn't make out who it was. Then they walked away. Then someone else passed. I could make out the few feet in front of my house, but I couldn't see past the sidewalk. How are people walking in this fog? How could they even possibly see in it, unless they weren't human? This must have been an alien takeover. It must have happened during my staycation, and I was the only living thing that didn't get kidnapped. But if an alien takeover did happen, how was I talking to Dylan? Was I even talking to Dylan? Now I had too many questions and no answers. My head was spinning. I would sit on my couch, but that was gone. Finally, a bigger shadow peered through the window. The silhouette just stood in front of the entrance to my yard. They just stood there. Maybe it was Dylan. I started to pound at my window with every ounce of my strength. I yelled at the top of my lungs. I kept going until my hands started to really hurt and my knuckles started to bleed. Please, Dylan, please let it be you. But the silhouette did not budge. It stood there for a few more minutes. It looked like it was looking down, possibly a phone. I checked my phone, but I didn't get any new text messages. Instead, the screen had turned black with a timer counting down from an hour. I fell to my knees and rolled into a ball. My dog is gone. My stuff is disappearing. As far as I know, my world is ending or has already ended. All I can do is just sit here and do nothing but let whatever forces take me. I began to bawl my eyes out. The feeling of hopelessness washes over me. As I sat there, my eye caught the reflection of a red light from one of the walls of my empty living room. It was coming from outside. It looked like it was moving or changing hues. I got up and looked outside. I didn't see anything at first until I looked up at the angle the light was coming from, and there, floating in midair, big red text lighting the front of my house spelled, "Your free trial has ended, 40 minutes remaining. Thank you for playing." Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. 20 years ago, a child went missing. 2 months ago, I found him. I don't know what I'm doing posting this to a damn internet forum, but I need to get it out somehow. Maybe writing it all down and posting it online will help. I doubt it, but it's worth a shot. Here goes nothing. My name's Daniel Mathis. I used to be a detective, but I retired 2 months back. Well, maybe retired isn't the right word. Forced to quit is more like it. Either way, I'm not on the force anymore. That's enough about me, though. If I'm going to tell this story properly, then I need to start at the beginning. The very beginning. It started 20 years ago. A child went missing. A little boy, only 10 years old. His name was Johnny. I'd worked on a few missing person cases before, but this one was different. Johnny was walking back from school with some of his friends. It was getting dark, so he decided to take a shortcut through the woods. His friends were too scared to follow, so Johnny went alone. Needless to say, he never made it home. His parents reported him missing a few hours later. We searched the area for days. We questioned every sex offender in a 15-mile radius. Hell, we combed through every inch of that damn forest, but we never found him. Whoever took Johnny was smart about how they did it. They knew how to cover their tracks. It was almost like the kid vanished into thin air. Flash forward a month to mid-January, and I'm knocking on his parents' front door. It was snowing that day. I remember Paul, the kid's father, answered the door. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. Despite this, he still made an effort to be polite. He gave me a weary smile and shook my hand. "Detective Mathis, come in," he said. "My wife's in the living room." His wife, Erin, was sitting with her back to me, staring at the TV. On the screen was a recording of Johnny, taken a couple months before he disappeared. It was grainy and blurry the way home videos are. He had bright orange hair, freckles, and green eyes. Just like his mother. In the video, he was dressed in a puffy jacket and playing around in a pile of leaves. It must have been taken in their front yard. "Mommy, Mommy, watch this," he yelled, getting a running start before leaping head first into the pile of leaves. He burst out a few seconds later, stray foliage clinging to his hair. "Wow, sweetie," Erin's voice said from behind the camera. Johnny flashed a beaming smile, showing off the gap between his front teeth before preparing to jump into the leaves once again. I stood in the doorway to the living room watching the video unfold. Once it reached its end, Erin started it from the beginning. It was only a few seconds long. She gazed into the TV, rubbing her necklace with her thumb, silently whispering along. "Dear?" Paul said, shaking her from her trance. "Detective Mathis is here." Erin looked over and paused the video. "Please take a seat," Paul said, gesturing to a chair. Both he and Erin sat on the couch across from me, his hand holding hers as I started to speak. "Mr. and Mrs. McLean, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that it is not good news. We have to call off the search for Johnny. Erin broke down immediately, sobbing into her hands. Paul squeezed his eyes shut, trying to stop himself from doing the same. To be honest, I felt like crying as well. I fought to keep it going for as long as I possibly could. But, well, Johnny's been missing for a month now, and we've run out of leads. We're going to keep the case open, but until any new evidence comes to light, well, there's nothing we could do. The living room was filled with the sound of Erin's wails. Paul tried his best to comfort her, but he was barely keeping it together himself. "You promised," Erin started to shout. "You promised you would bring him home." "Mrs. McLean, I am—" "Why can't you bring him home?" she screamed. She rose to her feet and stormed upstairs, leaving Paul and I alone in the living room. "I'm sorry, I really am," I muttered, unable to look him in the eye. Paul wiped the tears away from his face before rising to his feet. "I think you should leave." I looked up at him, opening my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I simply nodded my head and rose to my feet. Paul was barely fighting back his tears as I left. Soon as I shut the door behind me, I could hear him break down and start to sob. Paul and Erin both died 15 years later. Paul started drinking and never stopped. Erin drove her car off a bridge in the middle of the night and drowned. I don't think they ever forgave me. Not really. To them, I was always the detective that failed to bring their child home. It was the 20th anniversary of the kid's disappearance, December 5th, when I came home to a letter. It had no return address or any distinguishing features. It was just a plain white envelope. There was no way it could have been delivered by a mailman. Someone dropped it off personally. I still have it somewhere, but I don't need to read it again to remember what it said. The words are branded into my brain like a hot iron. I sat at my dining room table, cut the envelope open, and started to read. "Dear Detective Mathis, if things were different, I would have written this letter to Johnny's parents. I regret that I never got the opportunity to explain this to them. I know they never would have been able to understand, but I would have liked to explain it regardless. Enough about that, though. With them gone, I have decided that the only one worthy of my confession is you. I watched you search for me, you know. I watched your interviews on the news. I watched as every lead you had went cold. In fact, I've seen you in person. You wouldn't have noticed me. I would have just been another face in the grocery store or on the street. But I noticed you. I always noticed you, Detective Mathis. I am sure you have figured it out by now, but I am the one who took Johnny. I am the one who snatched him away in the woods 20 years ago. I still remember how I lured him into my car. I remember how I knocked him unconscious. I remember how much I was shaken. I want you to know that I never touched him. Not like that, anyway. I want that to be known. On the back of this letter are coordinates. Follow them and more will be revealed. And if you tell the police about this, you will be throwing away your only chance to do right by Johnny. No more mysteries, no more games. It's time you learn why I did what I did. I sat there reading and rereading that letter for what felt like hours. There were two possibilities. Either the person who took Johnny 20 years ago really had sent me a letter confessing his guilt, or someone was messing with me, and I did not know which was worse. I flipped the letter over and looked at the coordinates, careful not to touch the paper too much. If this really was written by the person who took Johnny, I wanted to preserve the prints. Staring at the coordinates, my first instinct was to call the station, but then another thought came into my mind. I knew that if I showed up with other cops and the guy who took Johnny was there, he'd just get arrested. If I went by myself, I knew I could give him what he really deserved. No witnesses, no one to stop me from putting a bullet in his head. Besides, I could have just said it was self-defense. This man put Johnny's parents through hell. I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity to put him in the ground. I took a picture of the coordinates and plugged them into Google Maps. It was about a 30-minute drive located deep in woods outside of town. I threw on my coat, grabbed my gun, and raced out to my car. I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over with how fast I was going. As I sped down the interstate, the leather on my steering wheel creaked beneath my grip. My knuckles turned white and I caught myself grinding my teeth together. I thought about what the letter said, how he bragged about seeing me in public. How many times had I walked past this guy? How many times had I passed by someone on the street corner and that someone was him? I wasn't a cop at this point. I didn't have my badge or my lights on. I was just angry and ready to kill a man. Eventually, I turned onto an old dirt road. I followed the directions until I came upon a trail into the woods. Parking the car, I grabbed the flashlight from my glove box and stepped out. It was twilight and the forest was quiet, blanketed beneath a thick layer of snow. Not even the birds were making a sound. It was that kind of silence you only find in the dead of winter. As I trudged through the woods, I only became more furious. I imagined what it must have been like when Johnny was brought here. A million questions raced through my mind. Was he unconscious as he was dragged through the snow? Was he even alive? Did he leave a trail of blood, or was he wrapped tightly in a garbage bag? The coordinates took me off the trail and deep into the woods. I didn't even consider if I was going to be able to find my way back. I only had one thing on my mind. Finally, I reached the coordinates, only to find nothing. It was just a small clearing. Snow-covered ground, bare trees, and the dark sky hanging above. I shined my flashlight around, desperately searching for something, anything. I double-checked my phone to make sure I was at the right spot. I was. Stumbling over to a dead log laying up against a small hill, I sat down. I buried my face in my hands and wiped away a few tears as my breath disappeared into clouds of vapor. The snow came up to my ankles and the cold seeped through my boots. I slammed my fist down onto the decaying wood. I did it again, then again. I shot to my feet and spun around, screaming into the empty forest as I furiously stomped down on the log. The dry wood splintered and cracked beneath my boot as I yelled every profanity I could think of. After what must have been my 10th kick, my foot broke through the hollow log and slammed into something behind it, something metal. I stumbled back, my foot throbbing in pain. Shining my light through the newly formed hole in the log, I saw a rusted metal surface hiding beneath it. I frantically rolled the log aside, the wood breaking apart as I revealed what was underneath. Brushing the snow aside, I realized that what I was staring at was the entrance to a bunker. My breathing was heavy as I tugged on the latch. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The heavy door groaned as I swung it open. I was greeted with stone steps leading down into the dark. Shining my light, I saw just how deep this bunker was. It must have gone down 10 or 15 feet before the steps finally stopped and gave way to an unlit hallway. Drawing my gun, I took a deep breath and started down the steps. Leaving a trail of snow and mud behind me, I reached the bottom of the stairs and shined my light down the hallway. At the end of the hall was a large metal door. My own breath was deafening as I approached. Against the wall next to the door was a dial. Holding my flashlight in the crook of my neck, I turned it. I flinched as some sort of intercom screeched on, blaring an old and grainy rendition of "When Johnny Comes Marching Home." It began with deafening drums and an ear-piercing whistle before giving way to a cacophony of voices. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah! Stuffing my gun into my holster, I clasped my hands over my ears as the sound of an entire choir echoed throughout the bunker. We'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah! Pushing the metal door open, I stumbled into the room beyond and frantically looked for the source of the music. The men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies, they will all turn out, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. At the far end of the room was a computer with multiple monitors, one of which was hooked up to a loudspeaker. And we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching. I grabbed the wire and ripped it out of the speaker, abruptly stopping the music. With the song no longer playing, I looked around to get a feel for my surroundings. I was in a concrete room with low ceilings and flickering fluorescent lights. It looked like an old hospital ward. The counters were populated by scalpels, operating tools of various sizes, and syringes. In the center of the room was an operating table adorned with leather straps. The whole room smelled like rubbing alcohol. The lights in the ceiling did a poor job at illuminating things, making the whole bunker feel claustrophobic and suffocating. The wall on the left was like something you would see in a mystery film. Hundreds of pieces of paper pinned to a notice board. Some of them had notes furiously scribbled down in handwriting I could barely decipher. Others, however, looked like printed-off images of star systems. A picture of the Milky Way hung next to an old newspaper clipping from 20 years ago that read, "Strange lights spotted in the night sky." The wall opposite of that was, in fact, not a wall, but rather a glass divider, separating this section of the room from whatever was beyond it. Behind the glass was a thick blue mist, so dense that I couldn't even begin to see what was on the other side. "Johnny, are you here?" I shouted, running up to the glass and trying to peer through. Stepping back, I looked around the room in search of something to break the glass. That's when I saw it. On one of the computer screens was a recording titled "For Mathis." Approaching the screen, I moved the mouse over it and clicked play. "Hello, Detective Mathis." My grip on my gun tightened when I finally heard his voice. For 20 years, I had imagined what this monster sounded like. Finally hearing it felt surreal. The voice was slightly garbled by a modulator, but I could still tell that he was around my age. Mid-60s at most. "If you're listening to this, then you read my letter. If you were hoping to arrest me or maybe even kill me, I am sorry to disappoint you. I have taken exhaustive steps to cover my tracks. Even if you manage to find my identity, I will be long gone by then." I clenched my jaw, imagining how satisfying it would feel to choke him out. "I am sure you have many questions, and I think that this recording will answer most of them. But before I can explain anything, I think it is best to introduce you to someone." With that, the chamber behind the glass divider began to hiss. The fog quickly dissipated, and the room beyond was revealed. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what I saw when the mist fully cleared. I still see it. Every time I close my eyes, every time I fall asleep, I see that thing. On the other side of the glass, there was I don't even know what to call it. It looked vaguely humanoid, but its limbs were more akin to an arachnid. Countless fingers with numerous joints sprawled forth from its palms like a spider web. Its skin was brown and covered in a thick layer of slime that dripped down onto the floor. Its emaciated torso was hollow, its ribs curling outward to form a central cavity that bellowed slightly as the thing quietly breathed. "Detective Mathis," said the recording. "Meet the basilisk." Whether that is its true name or simply what it has chosen to be called is beyond me. As my eyes traveled over the creature's horribly misshapen and grotesque form, I saw something that made my heart sink into my stomach. Encased within its open rib cage was a body. It was small, frail, and wrapped in a cocoon of sinew. It dripped with the strange fluid, and parts of its discolored skin seemed to be merging with the creature itself. Taking a step towards the glass, I let out a quiet gasp when I saw the strands of orange hair hanging from its scalp. "Johnny," I whispered. To my horror, one of his green eyes fluttered open, his irises bloodshot. He looked at me for a split second before his pupil rolled back into his head, and he started to thrash about. He was alive. He was fucking alive. Through the glass, I could hear horrible, excruciating groans. I pray I never have to hear anything like that again. They reverberated off the walls of the bunker, the choked sobs of a child. A child crying not because he is sad or because he needs attention, but because he is in pain. I pressed my hand against the glass and fought back tears as I watched Johnny, the boy I thought had been dead for 20 years, writhe in agony before my eyes. Suddenly his screams were overpowered by a low groan. A strange clicking noise filled the room as the many elongated fingers of the basilisk began to twitch. After a few seconds, Johnny's muffled screams were silenced. His eye fluttered shut and he went still. As he stopped moving, so did the basilisk. "Johnny! Johnny!" I screamed, pounding on the glass. Neither he nor the creature responded. "Incredible, isn't it?" The recording spoke again. "The basilisk came to me 20 years ago. Its spacecraft descended from the stars before my very eyes." I was barely listening to the recording at this point. My eyes were fixated on Johnny as he lay motionless inside the creature's chest. Do you want to know the interesting part, Detective Mathis? When it came to me, I was a dying man. Brain cancer, stage 4, inoperable. His voice seemed sullen before perking up as he continued. "The basilisk cured me. I should have died years ago, but it halted my tumor in its tracks. I began to look around the room, searching for some way into the chamber, but I found nothing. Johnny was completely sealed off. Can you see it? The fluid that it is secreting? In that fluid lies the cure to cancer. Can you imagine a world where we do not have to fear such a horrid fate? The enzymes in that fluid were the key. I knew that if I could isolate them, learn how to replicate it, I could make cancer a thing of the past. And the basilisk was willing to help me." The voice paused for a second, and I could hear the man let out a sigh. "Except it needed something from me. It wanted a child. I've replayed that part in my head more times than I care to admit. It never fails to make me sick. The basilisk is a creature of the abstract. It feeds off futures that never were. And there is no one who has more potential or imagination for the future as a child. Johnny is alive in there. The basilisk is keeping him alive, keeping his psyche trapped in the body of a child, dreaming of the future he never had. I know your first instinct will probably be to try and pull him out, but that won't save him. The basilisk has been feeding off of Johnny for 20 years. They are merged in body and mind. If you separate them, they both will die." I started to cry. I stumbled back and leaned against the operating table, unable to peel my eyes away from the glass. The voice sighed deeply. "I know you think I am a monster, Detective Mathis, but I stand by what I've done. Do you know why?" He sounded so arrogant, so damn smug. "Because I figured out how to replicate the enzymes. In a few years, I will have a cure to every type of cancer there is. Do you know how many children die of cancer every year? Nearly 100,000. Nearly 2 million children have died in agony since I first took Johnny. Since I gave him to the basilisk. I had to do this. I have a duty to save as many as I can. And the basilisk never would have helped me if I hadn't given it a child. I sacrificed one so I could save millions. No matter how hard I tried, I could not look away from the display on the other side of the glass for more than a few seconds. The otherworldly, incomprehensibly twisted form of the basilisk. Johnny's nearly unrecognizable body trapped within. If I had gone to the government, the voice began again, they would have locked it away beneath the Pentagon. They would have tortured it, and if they ever realized the good it could do, they would have only given it to the rich. The 1% of the 1%, the corrupt, the greedy, and the perverted. I could hear the anger and bitterness in his voice. I'm going to give this cure to everyone, not just the wealthy. Soon cancer will be a distant memory. Johnny has made a necessary sacrifice. His suffering has led to an unprecedented leap in medicine. As the recording continued, I approached the glass, looking at the emaciated husk huddled within the chest cavity. His eye opened again only for a second. It looked around the room, seeming to follow the web of fingers clinging to the ceiling. In the seconds before he shut his eye again, I could see Johnny's pain, his fear. Now, the recording continued, the way I see it, you have a few options. You could call your precinct, but that would be foolish. If you show them the basilisk, the CIA won't be far behind. If they don't kill you, they will brainwash you into never speaking of this again. They will take both the basilisk and Johnny away for study. He will remain in his living hell, and it will be your fault. I looked down at the gun in my hand, running my thumb over the black metal. Your second option is to kill them, the recording said. Even though I knew they were coming, I felt my heart sink into my stomach as he said those words. I trust you brought your gun? The glass is not bulletproof, and neither is the basilisk. Just a few shots is all it should take. I am no fool. I know that if the basilisk is left unattended, it will eventually leave the bunker and begin searching for other children. Just like any junkie, the high will wear off and it will search for the next one. I could not bring myself to end its life. I worked with it for many years. It is practically my colleague. For the first time since the recording began, I detected a hint of compassion in his voice. So it is up to you, Detective Mathis. You can put Johnny out of his misery and walk away. You can be satisfied knowing that you ended his suffering the only way you could. Alternatively, you could notify the government. You could risk your own life and doom Johnny to who knows how many more years of agony. You are a pragmatic man, much like myself. I trust you will make the correct decision. And with that, the recording was over. I was left in the bunker with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the horrible abomination on the other side of the glass. Looking up from my gun, I saw Johnny staring at me. Not with one eye, but both. Tears trickled down his cheeks as he gazed at me, his eyes pleading for something. I don't know what was going through his mind. I'm not even sure if he was still capable of thought after 20 years of torment. After a few seconds, the basilisk's fingers twitched again, and Johnny was pulled back into his slumber. I looked down at my gun again. My hand was trembling. A few minutes later, I stepped out of the bunker and into the cold night. The chill nipped at my skin and the barrel of my gun was still smoking. A light snow began to fall as I sat down on the hollow log. I began to sob. I wiped at my eyes, but the tears kept coming. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, I cried. As I wept, I felt my gun's weight in my hand, 2 bullets lighter than when I had arrived. Story 2 ends here. Now, we drift into Story 3. My dog went missing in the woods. He came back wrong. I don't know what came back from the woods, but it wasn't Max. I live alone in the northern part of Vermont, not deep wilderness, but rural enough that my nearest neighbor is half a mile down the road, and the forest behind my house goes on for miles. I moved out here after my divorce, hoping for some quiet, some peace. Just me, my old dog, and a bit of land to call mine. Max was a mutt, German shepherd and something else, maybe lab or collie. Big, loyal, dumb as bricks. He liked chasing squirrels and barking at shadows. He'd been with me for 8 years, and honestly, he was the only thing that kept me sane after everything fell apart. Last week, he ran off into the woods and didn't come back. It was just past sunset. We were out back, him sniffing around while I stacked firewood. Then he froze, ears up, tail stiff, and bolted into the tree line like something had called him. I shouted, but he didn't even hesitate, just vanished between the birches. I waited with a flashlight until midnight. Nothing. I searched the woods all the next day. I called his name until my throat was raw. No barking, no paw prints, no disturbed underbrush, like he'd just been erased. By the third day I stopped looking. I left his food bowl out anyway. Hope makes you stupid like that. On the 5th night, just past 3 a.m., I heard scratching at the back door. My heart damn near exploded. I grabbed the flashlight, ran downstairs, and there he was, sitting on the porch like he'd just gone for a stroll, dirty, tail thumping weakly against the boards. "Max!" I shouted, tears already blurring my vision. "Jesus, Max, where the hell did you go?" He wagged his tail harder and leaned into my chest when I opened the door. His fur smelled like wet leaves and mildew, but I didn't care. I dropped to my knees and hugged him. He didn't lick my face. Max always licked my face. I chalked it up to exhaustion. It took me a day to realize something was wrong. Max was off. Not limping or hurt, but different. Detached. He followed me around the house like normal, but there was no spark in his eyes. No barking at passing cars, no growling at the mailman, no interest in toys or treats. He just watched me, all the time. Sometimes I'd find him sitting in the hallway, perfectly still, staring into the corner. Other times I'd catch him watching me sleep, not curled up by the bed like usual, but sitting upright in the doorway. Perfect posture. Head tilted, silent. At night I heard him moving, pacing, his claws tapping across the hardwood. But every time I got up to check, he'd be in the same spot, laying by the fireplace, breathing slow and steady. And then there was the thing with his reflection. Max used to hate mirrors. If he caught his reflection in the TV screen, he'd bark and back away. Now, he stares at them. I noticed it one night when I was brushing my teeth. I glanced at the bathroom mirror and nearly dropped the toothbrush. Max was sitting behind me in the doorway, unmoving, staring directly into the glass. His reflection wasn't staring at me. It was staring at itself, and it didn't blink. I tried to get him to look away, called his name, snapped my fingers, nothing, just that steady, vacant gaze. I moved closer and waved my hand in front of his face. Finally, he blinked, slowly like it was an afterthought, and turned his head toward me. For a second, I could have sworn his pupils were too big, too wide, too human. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days ago, I woke up to find Max standing on the kitchen table, just standing there like a statue. He didn't move until I touched him, and even then it wasn't a startled jump. It was slow, mechanical. He stepped down one leg at a time and padded out of the room like nothing happened. That same night, I found dirt in the hallway. Not tracked paw prints, just a mound of black earth like someone had dumped a shovel of soil from the woods onto my floor. I cleaned it up. It came back the next morning. Last night I followed him. He got up at 2:14 a.m. I heard the back door creak open. I grabbed my flashlight and slipped outside after him. The air was ice cold, moonless. Max was moving fast. Through the brush, no hesitation, no noise. I kept my light low and my distance close, following the sound of his steps. He led me deep into the woods, past the creek, past the old hunting blind, into a part I hadn't explored before. The trees thinned out, and I saw movement ahead. Max was sitting in front of something. It looked like a shallow pit, maybe 10 feet wide, 6 feet deep. Freshly dug. The dirt was wet, mounded around the edges like something had crawled out. Or maybe in. Max turned to look at me. His eyes reflected the flashlight beam like an animal's. But instead of the usual green-blue shine, they were red, dull and heavy like blood soaked through paper. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just smiled. At least it looked like a smile. His lips peeled back too far, teeth too white, too even. Then he stood and walked around the pit and disappeared into the trees. I didn't follow. This morning there were 2 bowls of food gone, 2 spots in the snow melted where bodies had slept. Max is sleeping at my feet now, but I swear he's not alone. Sometimes I catch him looking into corners again, not with curiosity, with anticipation, like he's waiting. And earlier I found another mound of dirt by the door. This one had something sticking out of it. A bone, not a dog bone, a finger. I don't know what came back from the woods, but it isn't Max, and I don't think it came back alone. I didn't go to work, didn't check my email, didn't answer calls. Instead, I drove into town and bought every motion-activated camera the hardware store had. Trail cams, baby monitors, even a few cheap security ones. I told the clerk I had a coyote problem. He gave me a tight smile and didn't ask questions. When I got back home, I set them up everywhere. 1 in the hallway, 1 in the living room, 2 in the backyard, 1 pointed at Max's bowl, and 3 around the perimeter of the woods. I linked them to a basic monitor on my desk and kept the feed up all night. Max watched me while I installed them. He didn't move, didn't make a sound, just sat there on the floor staring, as if he already knew what I'd see. That first night I didn't sleep. I watched the feeds until my eyes burned. At 1:23 a.m., Max stood up. The hallway camera caught it. He rose, slowly, unnaturally, and walked out of frame. The living room cam picked him up next. He passed through without even glancing at the lens, just heading for the back door. I leaned forward in my chair. On the backyard feed, the door opened by itself. Max stepped outside. Then the footage glitched. Not a full static burst, more like a flicker, the kind you get when frames are missing. 1 second he was walking past the fire pit. The next, he was standing still facing the tree line. The timestamp jumped by 4 seconds. Then the other cameras started triggering. Movement in the woods, 3 different feeds, shapes passing between trees, tall shapes. Too tall. I squinted, adjusted the brightness, but the figures stayed just out of the light. Their limbs didn't move right. They glided. Max was still in the same spot, unmoving. Then he turned his head, not toward the woods, toward the camera. And he smiled again. That too wide grin, teeth too flat, too many of them. Like something had drawn a dog from memory but never seen one up close. The backyard feed cut out. I checked the camera the next morning. The lens had been smashed in. The mount was twisted, almost melted. No footprints, just more dirt. Another mound at the tree line. This one was shaped like a child, small, curled. I didn't dig. I kept watching the footage every night. It kept getting worse. Max left the house at the same time each night. 1:23 a.m. Exactly. Sometimes he stood still. Other times he disappeared for hours before coming back soaked in mud, paws black with something thicker than soil. The shapes in the woods came closer each time. The 3rd night they stood at the edge of the yard. The 4th night they were on the porch. The 5th night they were inside. I didn't see how they got in. No doors opened. No windows broke. One frame they were gone. The next they were standing in my living room. 7 figures. Tall, pale, wrong. And Max stood in the middle of them, tail wagging slow like a metronome. His mouth hung open, panting, but the sound didn't match. I swear to God it sounded like whispering, like multiple voices speaking all at once in a language I couldn't understand. Then all 8 of them turned. They looked at the camera, and every feed cut to black. That was last night. This morning all the cameras were gone, not broken, gone. Even the mounts, even the cords, as if they were never there. Max is still here, lying by the fireplace, but now there's something new, a smell. Like rotten iron, like the inside of something dead. And behind the couch where the living room cam used to be, I found a handprint. Not a paw print, a human hand. Long fingers, sharp nails. But pressed into the wall at shoulder height, as if whoever left it had crawled out from inside the floor. I tried to take a picture. My phone won't turn on, none of them will. And I know they're coming back tonight. They let me see them. They wanted me to. Because now I've started to hear the whispering, even when I'm awake. Not from outside, from Max. He hasn't moved in 2 hours, he hasn't blinked once, and I think he's smiling again. Please, if anyone's reading this, if anyone's seen anything like this before, tell me what to do. Because I don't think I can stay here tonight. But I also don't think they'll let me leave. Story 3 ends here. Now, listen closely to Story 4. Shoom, scare prank. Transcript of an interview conducted by Detective Peyton Charles of the Edmonton Police Service with Matteo Ricci regarding the deaths of social media influencers Gavin and Mitchell Matthews on June 12, 2025. Interview conducted on June 14th, 2025. Transcript provided without the consent of the Edmonton Police Service. This is not an official EPS document. Transcript begins. Charles. All right, Mr. Ricci, the tape is rolling. Are you ready to go through it now? Ricci, yes. Yeah, I think so. Charles. All right. Whenever you're ready, can you start by giving your name, please? Ricci. Matteo. Matteo Ricci. I do video stuff for the Matthews brothers, least I used to, I guess. Charles. Were you present on the night of June 12th? Ricci. Yes, I saw the whole thing. I don't know how much got filmed. I dropped my camera pretty early on, but maybe there might be something there. Charles. Why don't you walk me through it? Let's start at the beginning, all right? Tell me about the Matthews brothers and what you were doing in the woods that evening. Ricci. We were filming. Gavin and Mitch, they did a lot of prank videos, streams, stuff like that. They got in shit for it a few times, but it pulled in views, got people talking. That's how you make money. I think they even ended up in a Moist Kiar video at one point. Or maybe it was someone else, I don't know. Anyway, we filmed a lot of videos on this one hiking trail. You get a lot of joggers, cyclists, and dog walkers passing through, so if you want to, set up a fun scare prank, you can do it there. Charles. Scare prank? Ricci. Yeah, it's like a prank where you scare someone. Those always did pretty well. There's some pretty heavy forest along the trail, so there's a lot of places on the trail where you can hide and pop out. Gavin and Mitch always played it up a bit. They'd use costumes, actresses, stuff like that. The whole idea was to go as hard as possible and scare the shit out of whoever was passing by. I remember one time they got these realistic raptor costumes, super realistic, with moving heads and articulated tails. And whenever someone would pass by, Mitch would walk out onto the trail in front of them. I'd be in the woods playing these roaring noises on my phone. And while they were trying to make sense of what they were looking at, Gavin would come out behind them. Soon as he saw Gavin, Mitch would charge at them, and when they turned around, they'd run right into Gavin. People usually lost their minds, started crying, took off into the woods. One guy even pissed himself. Pause. Charles. That's considered a prank, Ricci. It was funny. We wouldn't hurt them. I mean, this one lady broke her ankle when she fell off the path, but that was it. She really tried to tear into Gavin, but he told her to chill out. He said it was just a prank. It wasn't our fault she freaked out and fell off the trail like that. Charles. And you did this off it? With the Raptors? Ricci. I mean, the Raptors was a one-time thing. We did lots of other stuff. Clowns, serial killers, fake kidnappings, fake muggings. Look, I know it sounds bad, but it was just for fun. You know that old comedy show, Just for Laughs? They did these kinds of pranks all the time. It was exactly like that. Charles. Sure. So what was the prank on that particular day? Ricci. We were doing like a slasher type thing. We had this one girl we worked with sometimes, Steph, she'd run out of the woods screaming, covered in fake blood. Then Gavin would come out of the woods after her. He had a mask and a machete. It was a prop, like a fake one. And he'd run Steph down and pretend to kill her. Then Mitch would come out and stare down whoever was on the path, and he'd be holding his own machete. Then he'd start chasing them. Not too far, just far enough. Charles. Right, so what exactly happened? Ricci. Well, we were shooting for a bit around dusk. You don't see as many people around then, so it's easier to space out the scares. I'd set up a few hidden cameras to film the pranks, but I had a handheld to get the behind-the-scenes stuff for our YouTube channel, too. Things were going pretty good. We'd gotten some solid reactions. It was going good. Then Gavin said he needed a minute. He was just going to go and take a leak. We were in the woods, so he went a little deeper in to take care of business. We should have been able to see him. I saw him stop by this fallen tree a good maybe, 15, 20 feet away. I took my eyes off of him because Steph was reapplying some fake blood and talking. Plus, I didn't really need to watch the man pee, and that was the last I saw of him. Charles. I see. How long until you noticed he was missing? Ricci. 5, 10 minutes maybe. Mitch said something about it, asked where he'd gone. I told him that Gavin was just over by that tree, but when I looked there was nothing there. So I went over, tried to find him. Fuck. Charles. What did you see? Ricci. Nothing at first. I was calling for him, but I didn't see him around anywhere, at least not until I saw the shoe. Charles. The shoe? Ricci. I saw a shoe on the ground not too far away. I knew it was his. It was one of those sneakers. You know, the ones celebrities come out with sometimes. I don't remember anything else about it. They had this really distinctive tread on the sole, though, so I knew it was his. I went over to take a closer look, and that's when I saw his leg. What was left of it, at least. Fuck. Charles. Mr. Ricci? Ricci. Just give me a minute. Fuck. There was just this piece of his leg sticking out of the shoe. I could see the bone just jutting out of it. And that's when I noticed the movement in the woods. Charles. Movement from what? Ricci. I don't... Pause. Charles. Mr. Ricci. Ricci. It was there, standing in the trees. I don't know how I didn't notice it sooner. It was getting dark at that time, and its body was dark, I guess. It was hard to get a good look at it, but I remember the skin had this texture to it, like rock or wood. I guess if you weren't looking for it, it was easy to miss. There were some feathers on its head. Just a few, sort of like a headdress. It wasn't prominent, but I still remember it. I saw the eyes first. Big orange eyes looking at me from the woods. It was low to the ground, so they were almost at the same height as me. Then I heard it. There was this low humming sound. I could feel it in my chest, like it was making all of my organs shake. It reared up. God, it was tall. So fucking tall. 15 feet maybe? Bigger? I don't know. All I know is that its eyes never left me for a moment. Its mouth opened. It wasn't like you see in the movies. In the movies, it always has an overbite to show off the teeth, but no. You didn't see the teeth until it opened its mouth. And I knew it was going to kill me. I knew. Charles. What was going to kill you, Mr. Ricci? I'm sorry. What exactly did you see in the woods? Ricci. Fuck me. Fuck. Laughs. Charles. Mr. Ricci? Ricci. It was a motherfucking T-Rex, detective, just like you'd see in a movie, only... Christ. This one was standing right in front of me. It moved closer, but it didn't make a sound as it did. All I heard was that low hum I could feel in my bone. Then Steph. God, Steph. Charles, she saw you? Ricci. Yeah. She started screaming. The Rex. It just looked over at her, sizing her up. Mitch was right beside her, just frozen. Can't imagine he knew what to make of this thing either. Either way, guess the Rex found them more interesting, 'cause that's who it went after. It let out another low rumble and went after Steph. God. Charles. What happened to Stephanie Hauser? Ricci. It just... one minute she was there and the next. I could hear her screaming in its mouth and in its throat. It just... swallowed her. There was some blood, I think. But she was just gone. Fuck, she was just... Charles. What did you do? Ricci. I saw Mitch had started running. I did the same. I think that's when I dropped my camera. I don't really remember. I just remember looking back and seeing that thing staring at us. Then it started moving. It didn't make a sound. You would have thought it would have made a sound when it walked, like in the movies, but there was nothing. It wasn't even running after us, but it was still catching up. Laughs. Fuck me. Charles, how'd you escape? Ricci. There was a creek up ahead with a little bridge going over it. Not a lot of room under there, maybe 2 feet, give or take. Mitch dove right under and I went with him. Barely made it in time and it was right behind us. I could see it standing just at the edge of the bridge. We could hear it sniffing around as it tried to figure out how to get to us. I kept waiting for it to just destroy the bridge. It started nudging it at one point. Then suddenly it lost interest. That's when I heard someone else screaming. Charles. Someone you recognized or... Ricci. No. Someone else on the trail, I think, maybe a jogger or a cyclist. I never saw them. That got the Rex's attention for a bit, though. I saw it move away from the bridge, thought it might eat that poor bastard, but... Charles. Mr. Ricci? Ricci. Silence. Charles. Mr. Ricci, what happened? Ricci. There was a clicker, like the kind you'd use to train an animal. I heard it, followed by a whistle. Someone whistled at that fucking thing like it was a goddamn dog. Whoever we heard screaming, I could hear them running away. The Rex didn't chase them. It wanted us. Charles. Are you sure? Ricci. It never left, detective. I remember at one point it put its foot on the bridge. You could see the wood sagging under the weight. Mitch started freaking out. He was terrified it was gonna crush us. Maybe it would have. I saw the wood starting to splinter, and that's when Mitch tried to run. Emphasis on tried. He panicked, tried to make a break for it. It got him immediately. The moment he was out far enough, it grabbed him. I could hear him screaming. God, the screaming. Pain, terror, fear. One of his legs came off. I heard the bone snap and saw it drop into the creek right in front of me. I could still hear him screaming from its gullet. It ate him alive, detective. It swallowed him fucking whole, and he was still screaming for God only knows how long afterwards. God. Oh God. Oh God, oh God, I don't know how long it lasted. He went quiet after a little while. I don't know if he suffocated or what, but I was sure I was gonna be next. I was sure of it. Charles, clearly you weren't. Ricci laughs. Yeah, clearly. Charles. So the animal, did it leave after attacking Mitchell Matthews? Ricci. No. It was sniffing near the spot where he'd been. Still looking for me. It started pressing down on the bridge again. And I was sure this time it was going to break. But that's when I heard the clicker again. The Rex just paused like it was listening. Someone whistled, and that was when it left, and for a moment everything was quiet. Then I heard footsteps. Someone walking over the bridge. I saw them step down into the creek. And they spoke to me. Charles. What did they say? Ricci. She said I could come out, that she'd sent it away. I didn't want to, but I didn't really have much of a choice either. She helped me get out of there. She was smiling the whole time. I recognized her face. She was pretty hard to forget. Charles. You knew her? Ricci. Kinda. You remember the raptor prank I told you about? She was the one who fell off the trail. I remembered her 'cause she'd been this sort of hippie vegan girl. Look to her. Plastic-rimmed glasses, long frizzy brown hair, freckles. She looked at me and just gave me this ear-to-ear grin. She asked me, "What's wrong? You're not scared, are you? It's just a prank." Charles. I see. Ricci. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, looking at Mitch's severed fucking leg, shaking like a leaf. And she just patted me on the shoulder and walked away like it was no big deal. Charles. That was it? Ricci. Pause. Yeah, that was it. Charles. I see. So, just to be clear, your official story is that your friends got eaten by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's the gist of it, right? Ricci. It's not a fucking joke. That thing was in the fucking woods. She fucking sicked it on us. Everyone's fucking dead. Charles. Pause. There's no need to get aggressive, Mr. Ricci. Ricci. I know what I saw, detective. I know what I fucking saw. Charles. Of course. Sigh. No further questions at this time. Transcript ends. Addendum by Dr. Lana Bloom. This just gets funnier every time I read it. Is it cold-hearted to not give a damn about the trauma of some prank YouTuber's cameraman? Maybe. But they weren't exactly the most sympathetic people themselves, if you ask me. And besides, I thought they liked dinosaur pranks. Oh well. Mine was funnier. I've taken the liberty of financially compensating Detective Charles for providing this transcript to me, along with any video footage that was obtained during the test. Upon review, you can actually see the animal in the background of a few shots, but it is quite easy to miss. The camouflage works quite well. although I'm sure I can make it even better with future generations. I will admit I was aware that Dr. Hinton had some doubts about me testing the new product in this fashion. But after my success with the last test, he seemed willing to allow me to proceed, and I don't doubt for a moment that he'll be satisfied with the results. Not only have I demonstrated the animal's capability in the field, but I've demonstrated that it can be controlled, which is really half the battle. I really never understood those old movies where the mad scientist or evil general gets ultimately torn apart by their own creation. If they were actually smart, they'd have built-in fail-safes or a way to properly control it. But I digress. The new product has met all expectations. Now, if I could only think of a name. I know that technically speaking, it's not a real Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's just the closest I could biologically come to replicating one. Although I'd like to think I did quite well, especially with the silenced movement. People don't realize it, but the latest studies do in fact suggest Tyrannosaurus was a stealthy ambush hunter, and this is backed up by footprints showcasing cushioned pads in their feet. But there really just isn't a better name for this than, well, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Why mess with a good thing? And I suppose it's certainly a closer match to the original animal than my Pavaraptors were. Those were functionally just movie monsters made manifest. Alliteration, how fun, oh hell. Tyrannosaurus Rex it is, who's going to complain about it? Story 4 ends here, and now we enter the fog of Story 5. I went to the desert looking for rare reptiles. After what I experienced, I'll never go back. There's a place in the desert with incredible ecological diversity called a sky island. Specifically, the Sky Island is a 9,000-foot mountain surrounded by arid lowlands, and it happens to be the only place in the continental U.S. you can find jaguars. Of all the time I spent looking for animals there, I never thought something would be looking for me. I would have loved to see a jaguar, but I was primarily there for something else. Reptiles. There are more than a dozen rattlesnake species alone, and tons of other snakes and lizards with varying niches as you climb in elevation. I love them enough that I spent several days of my limited vacation time driving to a different state in their pursuit. The drive was relaxing for me. Long stretches of dry, rocky mountains dotted with creosote and cacti. Now I avoid those long, empty roads whenever I can and never drive them at night. Usually I'll try to plan the trip with some of my friends. It was a herpetology professor of mine that first told me about the area, and some old college buddies from that class shared my interest. This year, none of them could make it. I would have liked to see them, but there was something meditative about going alone. That might have been a factor in what later happened. The road I was driving was remote, enough so that my car and the stars were the only sources of light. Scraggly creosote bushes dotted the dry desert ground, drifting in and out of my headlights as I cruised the cracked asphalt. I drove slowly to spot any toads or snakes that might be out, and also to avoid hitting any jackrabbits. Periodically, they would dart across the road with their long, black-tipped ears pressed down against their skulls, appearing and disappearing in a flash. During the day, the road had some traffic, but it was normal not to see anyone for an hour or two if you happened to be driving in the early AM. That type of isolation lets your mind wander to places it normally avoids. Mundane concerns like your car breaking down are of course part of it, but I was more concerned with what might be in the dark. I put on the hazards and got out of the car to help a spadefoot toad across the road. I hated to see them get pancaked, which most cars driving 70 miles an hour would do without noticing. Outside of the car, a cool breeze brushed my skin and I was greeted by the quiet of the desert night. Crickets made their high, droning call, completely unaware of my presence. In every direction there was darkness, so deep that I found myself looking over my shoulder if I stood in one place too long. I don't think anyone had been attacked by a jaguar here, but you would never hear their bated breath or padded footfalls. I assured myself that it was a statistical impossibility. Putting on a nitrile glove, I gently scooped up the small toad. The oils in your skin aren't good for them. With my phone, I took several pictures. It was the first one of this species that I'd ever found, and I wanted to document it. My friends would be happy to see it. Besides, it was hard to tell exactly what species you'd found if you didn't actually catch it. As I made sure the pictures were in focus, I looked into the little creature's beautiful green eyes, wondering what it thought of this ordeal. I don't think they have an emotional aspect of fear in the same way we do, but I'm sure that handling them is stressful. I snapped a couple pictures and had it safely on the other side of the road within about 20 seconds. It rapidly took cover in the grass, its camouflage rendering it invisible. A rustle was barely audible over the idling engine, but I was certain I'd heard it. Something was in the brush on the far side of my car. Being alone in the dark in the desert makes you more perceptive than usual. I told myself that it was a jackrabbit. That was the most likely explanation. Slowly, I walked back toward my car, wanting the safety within. Part of me was curious. Perhaps it was a desert fox or something interesting. If someone else had been with me, I certainly would have pursued the creature with my headlamp. As it was, I just hopped into the car and rapidly closed the door. From the bushes, a jackrabbit exploded, powerful legs sending it across both lanes in 2 giant bounds. I jumped in my seat and a small laugh escaped my lips, making me realize I'd been holding my breath the whole time. It was a bad habit of mine to hold my breath whenever I was scared or concentrated. I'd almost passed out from it before. Driving back to the only motel in the area, I found a couple neonate rattlesnakes, hardly bigger around than your finger, and moved them off of the road. Instinctively, they struck at the snake tongs. I didn't blame them for trying to defend themselves, but I did want to get them off of the road. I'd already seen a few snakes that had been run over. A smile came to my face as I remembered bringing 2 friends on their first reptile hunt, and one of them incredulously asking, How did you even see that when I'd spotted a snake that size? Like I said, most people just pancake them without ever knowing they were there. Before calling it, I decided to take one last lap around a road in the foothills just to look. It was nearly 3 a.m., but I could only come here once a year, and you never know what you might find. This road was truly remote and got no traffic most days, much less at night. A whippoorwill darted off of the pavement, agile wings bearing a distinctive white spot carrying it into the night sky. My windows were cracked to let in the cool night air, and I was surprised to hear all of the crickets go silent. I listened carefully, not sure what I was listening for. It was then that my car died. I found myself in darkness, only able to see the outlines of the mountains because they were blocking the stars. Reaching onto the seat next to me, I fumbled around for my headlamp, clicking the button over and over. Nothing happened. I got my phone out of my pocket and desperately tried it as well. I couldn't get it to turn on. My breath had caught in my throat. I was terrified, not because of the dark, not just because I was alone. The car was reliable, yet it had died. The headlamp, for the first time ever, had refused to turn on. My phone was unresponsive. Any of these things alone would have been unlikely but reasonable. All three happening in the same instant was impossible. Something had happened. Something I couldn't explain. With the lights gone, my eyes began to adjust. I could make out pale sand in between the sparse shrubs just barely. Part of me wanted to keep clicking the buttons on my phone to try and start the car, but another part of me said it was pointless. Completely still, completely silent, I sat there with my senses on overdrive. Every click of the cooling engine sounding as loud as a gunshot. Each beat of my heart thudded in my ears. I wished it would quiet down so that I could hear if anything was around. Movement outside sent a wave of fear through my whole body. Instead of turning my head, I stayed perfectly still, only moving my eyes. My tongue was pressed rigid into the roof of my mouth. I was too afraid to breathe. It looked like something had moved on the top of the mountain. Locking in on the spot, I stared with a focus that I'd never felt. I needed to know what that movement was more than I'd ever needed to know anything. What was it? What was here with me in the dark? The engine still clicked, but nothing moved. Each second felt like an eternity. I couldn't tell you whether I sat there for 10 seconds or a minute. The only way I could guess time was that I still held my breath. The top of the mountain moved again, and this time I saw it. It was a rounded, domed shape. It looked wrong. Staring frantically, I tried to figure out what it was. When I did, I began to urinate. It was the top of a head, and the movement wasn't on the mountain, but a black silhouette standing right next to the car. Now the head grew higher above the top of the mountain. It was approaching my door. My eyes darted around to the other side. I saw there were more figures there, completely dark. Walking toward the car, there was a click. My doors had unlocked. Instinctively, my hand darted out to lock my door again. I kept it there, holding the small plastic switch in place as I felt it pulling in the other direction. Now the figure was just outside the window. It was about the height of a short person, but it didn't seem human to me. It pulled at the door handle, not angrily, not violently. It pulled as if it was surprised the door was locked, as if it had forgotten to unlock it when loading groceries, as if this was a commonplace. I screamed. That's all I can tell you about what happened. I wish there were more to the story, that I saw them fly off in a UFO or that they looked like some ancient spirits. All I can say for sure is that my first memory was about 45 minutes later at 4:37 a.m., parked at the motel soaked in my own urine. I do have some speculations on what happened, but they are just guesses. I think that they turned off the car and anything electrical. I hypothesize that when I opened my mouth to scream, I inhaled something that rendered me unconscious, or at least impaired my memory. My best guess is that when the crickets went silent and I held my breath, I was meant to inhale whatever gas it was. To never remember that my car died on that straight desert road. I was meant to never see them. Other than the memory loss, I was unharmed. I don't think they wanted to hurt me because they surely could have. I'm not certain what they wanted. I'm just a human and can only guess at their motives through a human perspective. I think they just wanted to catch me. Story 5 ends here now. Settle in so for story 6. Dude, he swore he knew a shortcut. They say you never truly know a person until you've seen them push to their limit. For me, that limit was a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, and the person was Ben. We'd been best friends since kindergarten, through awkward phases, terrible haircuts, and enough bad decisions to fill a small library. This particular bad decision started innocent enough, a road trip. Just us, my beat-up Civic, and a Spotify playlist that was 80% early 2000s pop-punk. Destination? A ridiculously overpriced music festival 3 states over. Ben was driving naturally because his sense of direction was only slightly worse than a blindfolded pigeon's, and he swore he knew a shortcut. Dude, trust me, he'd said, grinning, his hand already turning the wheel off the main highway onto something that looked less like a road and more like a suggestion. My cousin's friend's uncle took this once. Said it cut like an hour off the trip. I squinted through the dust devils kicked up by our tires. Your cousin's friend's uncle also said those shrooms he sold you were organic health supplements, Ben. Remember how that ended? He chuckled, a carefree sound that would later echo in my nightmares, twisted and distorted. Hey, that was a bonding experience. Besides, look at this, man. Untouched wilderness. Probably see a deer or something. He gestured wildly with one hand, narrowly avoiding a substantial pothole that would have eaten my suspension hole. Think of the Instagram content as the paved road gave way entirely, replaced by loose gravel and then just packed earth. The trees started crowding in. Not the neat managed forest you see near highways, but a thick tangled mess of ancient oaks and weeping willows, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The sunlight, once bright, became dappled and weak as if afraid to penetrate the canopy. The air grew heavy, smelling of damp earth and something else. Something metallic and vaguely sweet, like spilled pennies left in the rain. "All right, Ben, this is getting a little deliverancy," I ventured, pulling my phone out. No signal, of course. "How much further is this supposed shortcut?" He shrugged, eyes fixed on the road, which was now barely more than 2 muddy ruts. "Dunno, not far. See? It's getting darker. We'll be out of the woods before nightfall, definitely." His voice, usually so confident, had a slight edge of forced cheeriness now. Even Ben, the king of blissful ignorance, was starting to feel it. The trees were so dense now that it felt like we were driving through a tunnel, the world outside shrinking to a thin strip of muted gray overhead. I noticed something else, too. Every so often, nailed to a tree trunk or hanging from a low branch, there'd be a small, crudely carved wooden effigy. Not religious crosses, but abstract, jagged shapes. Some vaguely humanoid, others, just unsettling symbols. They looked like they'd been there for decades, weathered and faded, but somehow still menacing, watching us. "Those are charming," I muttered, pointing at one that looked like a stick figure with too many limbs. "Local folk art? Or a warning sign for no trespassing unless you enjoy ritual sacrifice?" Ben just grunted, gripped the wheel tighter. Probably just some weird hermits trying to keep people out. Smart, actually. If I had a piece of land this isolated, I'd put up creepy stuff too. He forced a laugh, but it died in his throat. The road narrowed further, and the overhanging branches scraped against the car's roof. A rhythmic grating sound that made my teeth ache. Then through a sudden break in the trees, we saw it. Not a town, not even a cluster of houses. Just a single isolated homestead. A dilapidated farmhouse, its porch sagging, windows dark and vacant like dead eyes, stood in the center of a clearing. Surrounding it were a few smaller outbuildings, a barn, a shed, all leaning at precarious angles as if exhausted. What struck me first was the silence. Total, absolute. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of leaves. Just the groan of Ben's brakes as he brought the Civic to a halt. "Well," Ben said, his voice unusually quiet, "looks like we found our shortcut." "More like our dead end," I countered, a chill crawling up my spine. The air here was even heavier, thicker, with that same sickly sweet metallic smell, only stronger now. It was like standing in a slaughterhouse, but without the sound of the animals. "Nobody's lived here for decades, Ben. Let's just turn around." "No, wait," he said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Look at that." He pointed to a faint, overgrown track leading past the farmhouse and disappearing into the woods on the other side. "That's gotta be the way through. It's just a little rough. Maybe we can loop around the house and see if it looks more passable." Before I could argue, he was out of the car, stretching his legs. "Come on, Alex. Look, it's kinda cool, actually. Like something out of a horror movie. See if we can find some ghost stories for the road." He was trying to sound casual, but his eyes, I noticed, were wide, darting from window to window of the farmhouse. I sighed, defeated. This was classic Ben. Curiosity always trumped common sense. Fine, I grumbled, stepping out into the oppressive stillness. The ground was oddly soft, a thick layer of damp earth and decaying leaves muffling our footsteps. As we approached the farmhouse, the details became clearer and a lot more disturbing. The paint was peeling off in strips like diseased skin. But it wasn't just neglect. Someone had clearly been here recently. There were fresh-looking scratches on the front door, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by something with claws, not tools. And the porch swing, though broken, still swayed slightly in a breeze that wasn't there, creaking with a terrible drawn-out groan. "All right, Scooby-Doo, you've seen your haunted house," I said, trying to inject some levity. "Can we go now before we get adopted by a family of inbred cannibals?" Ben, however, was already halfway up the porch steps. "No, wait, look at this. It's not just old, it's weird." He pointed to a series of symbols carved into the wooden banister. The same jagged, abstract shapes we'd seen on the trees, but larger, more elaborate. Some looked like distorted human figures, others like animals twisted into unnatural poses. One symbol, repeated over and over, resembled a crude, multi-limbed star. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. The air around the house felt colder, heavier, as if all sound and warmth had been sucked into it. A faint, almost imperceptible buzzing sound reached my ears like 1,000 flies trapped inside a jar, but it was too distant to be sure. "Ben, seriously, this isn't a joke," I said, my voice low. "My gut is screaming at me to get back in the car. This place feels wrong." He ignored me, pushing the front door, which groaned open with a burst of stale, moldy air. A darkness so profound it seemed to absorb light spilled out from inside. "Just a quick peek," he whispered, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, thick as snow. The room beyond was sparse. An overturned table, a couple of broken chairs. But then the light landed on something in the corner. A large wooden chest bound with rusted chains, and on top of it, arranged in a crude circle, were several small, human-like figures, not dolls exactly. They were made from dried reeds and twine, but intricately woven, and each had tiny, unmistakable human teeth embedded in its head like horrifying little crowns. My stomach lurched. "Okay, that's enough peek for me," I said, backing away slowly. "We are going back to the car right now." Ben, though clearly shaken, was still mesmerized. "No, wait. Listen." He tilted his head, listening intently. That faint buzzing sound was definitely stronger now. It pulsed, a low thrum that vibrated through the floorboards. "What is that?" Before I could answer, a sickening squelch echoed from somewhere deeper within the house. It was a wet, heavy sound, like something large and gelatinous being dragged across a damp floor. Ben's head snapped up, his eyes wide with a sudden dawning horror. The buzzing intensified, changing pitch, rising to a frantic whine like a swarm of angry wasps. Then through an open doorway at the back of the living room, a flicker of movement, not a shadow, not an animal. Something pale, something that moved with an unnatural, jerky gait. A silhouette, Too tall, too thin. "Oh, fuck," Ben whispered, his voice trembling. "Oh, fuck, Alex, someone's home." He didn't need to tell me twice. We stumbled backward, tripping over each other, a panicked ballet of terror. The squelching sound was closer now, accompanied by a wet, gasping breath. We burst out of the farmhouse, scrambling down the porch steps. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. We lunged for the car, fumbling with the keys. Ben, in his haste, dropped them. They skittered under the Civic. "No, no, no!" he hissed, dropping to his knees. The buzzing inside the house was now a furious roar, and a new sound joined it. A guttural, wet clicking like bones grinding together. I glanced back at the farmhouse. In the doorway, framed by the suffocating darkness, was the silhouette. It wasn't just tall and thin, it was wrong. Limbs seemed to jut out at impossible angles, and its head, it was lumpy, misshapen, with something that glinted wetly in the faint light. It was coming for us. "Forget the keys, Ben, run!" I screamed, grabbing his arm and pulling him up. We bolted, not towards the main track, but deeper into the woods, just past the homestead where that fainter, overgrown path led. It was overgrown for a reason. Thorny bushes tore at our clothes, branches slapped our faces, but we didn't stop. The metallic, sickly sweet smell was overpowering here, mixed with something else, something fetid and undeniably organic. The ground gave way beneath our feet more than once, sinking into boggy patches. The buzzing was all around us, not just from the farmhouse, but from the very air, vibrating in my teeth. We ran blindly, propelled by sheer, unadulterated fear. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the thought of that thing, whatever it was, pursuing us kept me going. Ben, always faster than me, was a few paces ahead, cursing and panting. Then he let out a choked cry. He tripped badly. I skidded to a halt, turning back. He was trying to push himself up, his ankle twisted at an unnatural angle. A sickening pop had echoed through the quiet woods. "My ankle! I think it's broken, Alex," he gasped, his face pale with pain and terror. And then I saw it. Not the thing from the house, but another, or a part of it. Hanging from a low branch, swaying gently, was a human hand, skinned, delicately preserved. Its fingers were elongated, tipped with sharp, black talons. And just beyond it, partially obscured by the undergrowth, was a crude netting. A ghastly tapestry woven from dried leaves, animal bones, and what looked terrifyingly like braided human hair. Trapped within it, struggling weakly, was a deer, its eyes wide with fear, its body already partially transformed. Patches of its fur were gone, replaced by glistening raw flesh, and its antlers had begun to twist into those familiar, grotesque star shapes. The buzzing was deafening now, a cacophony of monstrous insects. I realized it wasn't just inside the house, it was everywhere. Millions of them. Not wasps, not flies, something bigger. Something intelligent. From the trees behind us, a low, wet growl snaked through the air. The silhouette from the farmhouse was closer, and it wasn't alone. 3 of them, maybe 4, were moving through the dense undergrowth. their movements fluid and terrifyingly silent despite their unnatural forms. They were humanoid, but too tall, too gaunt, their skin a sickly gray, stretched taut over bulging muscles and jutting bones. Their heads were misshapen, bulbous, pulsating slightly, and they had no discernible eyes, only dark cavities. But the buzzing, it was emanating from them. Their bodies seemed to be a living hive, the source of the horrific noise, and from their heads, from what should have been their faces, long segmented proboscises extended, twitching, tasting the air. They were giant bipedal insects, or something that had been human and then consumed, transformed. "Get up, Ben, now!" I screamed, my voice raw. I tried to pull him, but he was dead weight, his face contorted in agony. The creatures were closing in. One of them, the largest, extended a long, slender arm adorned with the same sharp talons as the hanging hand. It moved with chilling speed, seizing Ben's good leg. He screamed a high, desperate sound that was immediately stifled as another one of the things clamped a free limb over his mouth. I couldn't move. I was frozen, watching in horror as Ben struggled, his eyes wide, pleading with me. The things surrounded him, their proboscises weaving through the air, their bodies thrumming with that awful buzz. One of them, its bulbous head twitching, brought its own taloned hand down, cleanly severing Ben's injured leg above the ankle. A geyser of blood erupted, soaking the leaf-strewn ground. Ben's scream was muffled, but the pain in his eyes was vivid, horrifying. The creature then did something even more sickening. It lowered its proboscis to the stump and began to feed. I saw it clear as day. The appendage burrowed into his flesh, and Ben's body spasmed violently. His eyes rolled back in his head, a single tear cutting a path through the dust on his cheek. My vision swam. Bile rose in my throat. I couldn't help him. There were too many. They were too alien. The creatures looked at me then, their featureless heads tilting as if assessing me. I felt the buzzing in my own skull now, a terrible, invasive vibration. It wasn't a sound. It was a touch, a presence. They were inside my head. I could almost hear their thoughts, a jumble of primal urges and something else, something cold and clinical. They wanted me, yes, but not like a predator wants prey. They wanted me for something else, something worse. Then from the corner of my eye I saw it. The netting, the deer still struggling weakly. And beside it, partially hidden by a thick bush, was a crude makeshift cage. Inside, huddled in a corner, was a human figure, a woman. Her eyes were vacant, her skin pale and waxy, but she was alive, and woven into her hair, hanging from her ears, her nose, her mouth, were the same segmented insect parts, the same talons, the same raw, glistening flesh that I'd seen on the deer. She was not just a prisoner. She was a host, already being transformed. A terrifying realization slammed into me. Ben wasn't just being killed. He was being prepared. The buzzing inside my head intensified, a dizzying spiral of sound and terror. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, landing hard. The creatures took a collective step forward, no longer rushing but advancing with a chilling patience. They knew I couldn't escape. Their collective hum seemed to vibrate through the very earth. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. This was it. This was where I became another twisted ornament, another host. But then Ben stirred. His eyes, still unfocused, landed on me. And for a split second I saw it. A flicker of his old self. His mouth, still covered by the creature's limb, tried to form words. His head shook almost imperceptibly. A desperate, impossible message. Run. That was all I needed. The terror was still there, a cold, crushing weight, but Ben's last, impossible gesture had ignited something else. A spark of fury, of desperate, primal survival. I wasn't going to just lie there and let them take me. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in my knee from the fall. My eyes darted around, searching. The overgrown path. It continued, just barely visible, dipping steeply down into a ravine. It was a leap of faith, a desperate gamble. With a hoarse cry, I threw myself forward, away from the creatures, away from Ben. I plunged into the ravine, tumbling down the rocky, root-choked slope. Branches whipped at my face, stones scraped my skin, but I kept going, propelled by pure adrenaline. I heard the creatures enraged, buzzing behind me, growing fainter as I descended. They were too large, too ungainly to follow me quickly down such a treacherous incline. I could still hear Ben's muffled cries, though, or maybe it was just the ringing in my ears, the echo of his final moments. I landed hard at the bottom, winded, bruised, but alive. The path here was even more overgrown, choked with thorny vines and stagnant puddles. But it was there, and it was leading away. I didn't look back, I just ran. I ran until my lungs felt like they would burst, until my legs buckled, until I could no longer hear the buzzing, until the stench of decay began to fade. I ran until the trees thinned out, until I saw a faint gray light filtering through the branches, the promise of an open sky. Hours later, stumbling out of the woods onto a desolate paved county road, I flagged down a passing pickup truck. The driver, an elderly farmer, took one look at my blood-soaked, torn clothes, my wild eyes, and didn't ask questions. He just drove me to the nearest town, a tiny dot on the map called Havenwood, and dropped me off at the gas station. He probably thought I'd been in a fight or worse. I didn't correct him, I couldn't. I gave the police a garbled, intentionally vague story about a wrong turn and a car accident, a violent stranger, and running through the woods. They sent a patrol car out to the area I described, but they found nothing. No Civic, no farmhouse, no trace of Ben. Just an ordinary, overgrown dirt track that branched off a county road and disappeared into an unremarkable, unkempt patch of forest. They told me it was probably just a delusion, or I was in shock. They said things like that happen sometimes in the wilderness. Missing persons cases, especially when the person involved was troubled, as they put it. Ben, with his history of minor scrapes with the law, was easy to dismiss. I know what I saw. I know what happened. I can still smell that sweet metallic odor, still hear the buzzing in my ears. Sometimes late at night when the lights are out and the silence is too loud, I feel a phantom vibration in my bones as if a million tiny legs are crawling just beneath my skin. I never told anyone the full story. Who would believe it? A friend, consumed by insectoid horrors in a forgotten homestead. They'd lock me up. But the real horror, the one that keeps me awake, isn't just the memory of what they did to Ben. It's the whisper in my mind, the knowing certainty that I didn't escape completely. That buzzing, that sensation of something inside my head, it never truly left. It's fainter now, a low hum, a subtle pressure behind my eyes, but sometimes when I look in the mirror, I swear I can see the outline of those jagged, multi-limbed star symbols faintly raised on the skin beneath my eyes. And my skin, it feels oddly stretched, and sometimes when I scratch an itch, I pull away a fingernail and swear I see a tiny, glistening, segmented black speck beneath it. And the worst part? My hunger. Lately it's not for food, it's for something raw, something fresh. And sometimes when alone I find myself extending my tongue just slightly, tasting the air, and it tastes sweet, metallic, familiar.